project back going again. We also spent 3 days, not last week, but the previous week, collecting more soil samples from the ball field areas and the construction areas. And the idea behind that was we had very limited amount of data. We made some assumptions in the health and safety plan and the soil and groundwater management plan that we thought that the soil across the site was consistent with what we had found. And so we wanted to go back and validate that assumption by collecting another round of soil data from the deeper is what we were looking for, because we knew that part of the construction plans were to rework a lot of the material back there, cut and fill types of situations back there. So we focused our efforts in the construction zone, at least, on the areas that were going to be cut, so that we knew what the concentrations were in the soil that was going to be handled during the construction. Out in the ball fields, we wanted to just try to get an idea. I should include the playgrounds in that, but we wanted to get an idea about what the soil was like a little at deeper elevations. So we collected probably close to 50 or 60, maybe even more soil samples from the different areas, and those elevations ranged from 0 to 4, 4 to 8, all the way down to 12 feet, or unless we got some refusal at some shallower elevations. So what we basically found was that the soil samples that we collected from the deeper elevations were pretty consistent with what we'd seen across the site. The highest concentration that we've seen, and these concentrations are in parts per million or milligrams per kilogram, and the original sample that was collected during the initial assessment was about 2,100 parts per million for arsenic, and the low was in the teens from some areas. And what we found across the site was the soil samples from the different elevations were within that range. Pretty much right down the middle, so to speak. Most of the soil concentrations ranged. I think the high was about 1,900, and there was some in the 40s and 50s or 60s kind of range, and it was anything in between. So validating our assumption that we had kind of designed the health and safety and the soil and groundwater management plan pretty adequately, we were comfortable trying to move the construction phase forward. So we've been working on that basically ever since. Also, what we did as part of our assessment was we went into the school and we collected 20 or so wipe samples from the different surfaces within the school. We focused mostly on desks and floors, accessible areas that might be, subject to a lot of activity. We also went and deliberately looked for areas in higher elevations, up in the rafters of sorts, on the top of pipes, in areas that you wouldn't be accessible, but wouldn't have really probably ever been cleaned. So to try to get a worst case and a best case scenario in terms of what kind of dust and what was in the dust when we did the wipe sampling. Each one of the rooms, you may know, has its own heating unit in it. So what we also did is we picked 3 rooms, 2 rooms along the side where the playgrounds are, and then one on the complete opposite side. And we actually went into those heating units, pulled out the filters, and tried to get some worst case samples inside of those air handling units to try to get an idea about what may be coming up and in and, running into the filters, so to speak. So basically what we found is all of the surfaces, the floors, the desks, the cafeteria tables, all of the areas where there's a lot of kids handling things, those were in very good shape. The concentrations were basically not present. There was 1 or 2 samples. One in particular was a window ledge in one of the rooms along the front playground area that had some elevated concentrations in it of arsenic and chromium, and that area was immediately cleaned after we had done our testing anyways. And I don't really have a great explanation for that. It didn't look any dustier than any of the other samples that we had collected. So we implemented a cleaning plan with Mike, the head of maintenance over there. So we've given him a guideline on what our expectation was with respect to the cleaning efforts. To go back a little bit, what we did find is in the non-accessible areas, on top of the pipes and on top of the beams, there is arsenic in the dust. And so the plan to solve that problem was to clean it. And we were going to clean that over the break when there's not any kids in the school. So everything will be done wet, so there won't be any dust generated while cleaning the dust. and Mike has a pretty detailed program on how to make that happen for us. There was some asbestos left on some of the pipes, and we all agreed that we would stay away from those areas, at least as it relates to the cleaning. But all of the long straight runs where the lion's share of the dust was on the pipes, those areas will be cleaned. So that's the update on the wipe samples, and they have continued to clean that school very diligently from that, even before and from that day forward since we did our testing.
I'd like to just point something out that I think is important for people to hear, but you had mentioned that when you did the samples on the area before the dust hits the filters versus the area after it goes through the filter, that the filters really are doing their job and you weren't finding.
Sure. Not only did we find some dust that was up in the pipes and in the ceilings, there was definitely some dust with arsenic levels in it inside those heating units on the below side or on the intake side of those units. And some of the filters were noticeably dusty. And in fact, one case we actually sampled the media from the filter, and there was a fair amount of arsenic in there. So the filters, I would say, are definitely doing their job. And they were originally on a 6-month change out cycle, and we put that on a 2-month cycle. So they basically went through and cleaned out all of the filters right after we got done presenting them with our results, and then they'll do that again in 2 months. So, and then I guess that takes us to today, where we started construction, and we had a health and safety meeting this morning.
We could mention, obviously, because DEP approved the plan, we then notified the contractor that if he could proceed in accordance with the newly issued health and safety plan and dust control plans. So, and he informed us that he was ready to start today. So we made sure that Russ was there and his engineer, who will be on the field monitoring staff, was there today, and so they could kick things off. So you take from there.
Okay, so what we did today is we basically started implementing the health and safety plan, most specifically the health and safety plan. The soil and groundwater management plan will kind of evolve as the project continues to move forward. But so the beginning part was a health and safety briefing this morning. We brought everybody in. We reviewed the plan together with everyone. Question and answer period took place. And then once that was done, everyone signed off on having acknowledged that they reviewed and understood the plan. They went back out to the site and they began prepping the site. And one of the big components of this successful implementation of the plans is to create an area where they can get things onto the site in what we would consider like a lay down or a clean area. And so that's basically what they did today, is they began to build that area so that they can get people on and off the site and keep them in clean areas for some of the more non-invasive, non-soil handling types of activities. So they started that process today. They had a dust suppression system out there today, which was kind of, I'd liken it to a snowmaker. We were talking about that a little while ago. If you didn't know that was going and you walked onto the site, you'd probably fall over because you thought it was a pretty big cloud of dust that was happening, but it was actually a mist that they were sending across the entire site for basically all of the construction activities. So I was pleasantly surprised with that, and that seemed to work very well. And that's going to be an ongoing management process to keep that system running. Once they get the site opened up, they should be able to get the water truck in there and really start to make everything quite a bit wetter, if you will. So in addition to the construction-related activities, some of our responsibilities are, we established a weather station monitoring point, and we set up our two continuous dust monitoring pieces of equipment. It's a dust monitor that's connected to a data logger, which is collecting dust levels in real time and downloading them to a data logger, which we check periodically. And because there's action levels on the perimeter of the project, and there's actually action levels on the interior portion of the project. So not only will there be, Chris is his name, Chris Wood, he'll be in the construction zone working with the contractor to manage the dust, but they'll also be monitoring on the perimeter of the construction site while all activities are taking place. So one of the units will be situated at all times between the construction zone and the school, and then there'll be another unit that's gonna kind of float depending on wind direction and velocity and such, so that we're trying to monitor, again, a kind of a worst-case scenario, which might be going towards the back of the property, for example. You'll have a monitoring station back there in an effort to monitor what could be going in the opposite direction that maybe no one would be really looking at. So
Are the workers wearing masks?
the workers are not wearing masks. No, the dust suppression is designed to keep the dust down so that they don't get it in their mouth, because you might think of the inhalation as the quickest mode, but actually when it gets into your mouth and then you ingest it is actually the worst of the two, believe it or not. So you have to, so the idea of keeping the dust down keeps them from having to actually wear a mask. So all of the data that we've had thus far, based on the limited time that the contractors will be on site, it doesn't represent an immediate hazard to them. So as long as we keep the dust down as we've prescribed, then they'll be safe inside the construction zone.
Did they have an option to wear masks if they wanted to?
There is a provision in the plan for a respiratory protection.
Okay.
That comes with another set of requirements. So if we were to go down that path, they'd have to comply with that section as well. But it is in there. Yes.
Well, I think she was saying they always have the right to wear masks if they want to.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
We're
like
certainly
that-
not preventing it or limiting them. In fact,
Right.
we've given them a guidance
Right, okay.
if they chose to.
Yep.
Yeah.
They have the option of wearing a mask if there was no
That's-
contamination, just for
okay.
dust
Right.
purposes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, there is a dust provision in the original specifications, and all a lot of what we've done is just you've heightened that a little bit more. So.
So
All right.
degree of you just said it right there. So if you could expand on that, what's the degree of extra work or extra effort that this has created?
Well, the most notable challenge now is the solution to this problem is separation. You have to create separation between what's at the surface grade and where the impacted soil is. So there's a number of options, and one of the big things that we need to get from DEP, and we're obviously working on that pretty regularly, is to try to get some real clarification from them on what is going to be acceptable in terms of that degree of separation. In landscaping areas, there might be 18 inches of separation, for example. On the ball fields, you'd want probably a good 3 feet of separation between the arsenic impacted soil and the surface elevations. In the building, where it would become inaccessible, other than the material that would be down placed as part of the building construction anyways, you could bring that material right up to the bottom of that layer. So the solution is separation. If we can get from them some definitions on what they are going to consider to be acceptable separations, that would go a long way to managing some of the costs, because the time that it takes to actually think about where the final elevation of this arsenic impacted soil will be is a process. And then in the event that there's soil left over, you have a disposal cost that you wouldn't normally have.
You say you're taking groundwater samples too?
We did. We took one groundwater sample from the well that we installed actually at the original phase, and there was some low levels in there, but there was nothing above the standards.
Okay.
We tried to put some wells in during the second round of drilling that we did, and we didn't find any water.
Now you were mentioning during the community forum that you believe there's arsenic in our public water.
I'm not really intimate with knowledge with that, but
Someone said that during.
well, there is arsenic in a lot of the public water supplies, and it's all managed at a much higher level than it's all treated, but long before it gets out.
Are you citing any study or anything? Because that was in the paper too, that.
That's not. I haven't done any studies. I haven't looked at it at all. I know that there has been documented concentrations of arsenic in the soil, in the groundwater, but not just in Georgetown, in a number of towns. There's a large arsenic belt that runs from Worcester all the way up to the seacoast in the bedrock, and there's a lot of documented cases. I'm by no means an expert, but there's a lot of documented cases of arsenic in groundwater.
But-
So, and those concentrations are managed at some at the municipal level and some at the private level, where they're treated before it goes into the
Okay.
to the tap, so to speak.
But you don't have any specific information on?
No,
Okay.
no. And the water that comes onto the site is not the drink. They don't get their drinking water directly from the school. It comes from the municipal system. It's piped in.
And those aren't bedrock wells, those are gravel pack wells, right?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I know that I'm sure they have a very comprehensive sampling program long before it gets out into the water supply for the town.
Did you reach bedrock in any of your soil samples?
I think so. We were doing geoprobing. I haven't. There's a geotechnical report. I haven't studied it in detail, but I believe they have that information. I think bedrock is shallow. We've definitely got some refusal.
We know in a few places it's shallow, George. There were
12 and a half
close
feet.
to where we're gonna be at the bottom of our excavations for footings, like, probably in a few places, it's above where we wanna be for the bottom of footings. We anticipated that.
Yeah, we didn't have much luck getting past about 12 or 12 and a half.
And how does arsenic at bedrock level leach up?
Well, part of what we're trying to do as part of this whole process is figure out where the heck this stuff came from. We don't believe that it's been deposited by some activity. In other words, we don't suspect that it's been trucked in, for example. So I wouldn't say that it's a man-made problem. So part of our argument or part of our discussion with DEP about this problem is talking to them about, educating them, if you will, on where did this stuff come from. And that's a process that we've been really involved in since day one. We thought that it was linked to the bedrock, but we had done a preliminary sample. We basically took a piece of bedrock and we pulverized it and we analyzed it, and there was some arsenic in there, but there wasn't quite as much arsenic in there as I thought might have been in there. So we're digging in to try to figure out the history of the town. And I've got, this is starting to kind of come about, but 1668, we're going back. Bog iron is documented here in the town. In fact, that there were some iron work type facilities in Georgetown, and so there may be a link there between, back in the 1600s where Georgetown was a place where there was iron deposits, and iron are linked with arsenic. Yeah. So it's
No, I'm just wondering, how does the
How does it make its
arsenic
way
get
to the
released,
surface?
go up?
you're going into you're going into geologic deposits here. You're going back into like
Oh, so it's always been there.
oh, it's always been there,
So-
right? Absolutely, yeah. It's not
It's not like
anything
the
that
rock is
happened in our
breaking down and
lifetime.
Flaking up.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
wondering.
no. In fact, in some situations, the bedrock has oxidized, and as the oxidation occurs, there's been linked to arsenic because there's arsenic in the bedrock, and so for that you'd expect to see the concentrations higher as you get closer to bedrock, but that really wasn't the case for us. We found that their concentrations were kind of all over the place. And not really higher always when we got down to the bedrock. So it's a process. We've actually retained the services of a arsenic expert. Her name is Carol Stein, and she has a PhD from Harvard, and her arsenic is her expertise. And so we've been funneling the data to her to have her review that data and look at that data and help us with some scenarios that may explain where this stuff's coming from.
Do we have a time frame at all when DEP can make a decision, or she will make some type of determination?
It's probably one of the biggest priorities for us right now. We need to get that nailed down. It affects the deposition of the soil during construction pretty significantly. So it's a priority for us. We're talking to her about what additional information she may want to see from us. We've approached DEP already about it. They seem interested and willing to talk to us about it. It's the kind of thing that you have to go there with all your kind of ducks in a row before you go sit down with them. So Victor Folcom right now is the case manager for DEP, and we've spoken with him about it. He seems agreeable and interested in talking more about it. What I'd like to get from him right away is in the soil and groundwater management plan we had identified several different scenarios for deposition of the soil on the way out, if you will. So I'd like to get his support in that. I think that he reviewed the IRA plan very quickly, and I'd like to go over it with him in detail to make sure that he really understands, some of the things that we're talking about doing out there. So that's going to be my first step with him. and then coming and meeting with him. I really hope that happens within the next couple weeks. Yeah,
So I
it's-
have a couple questions. One is, what's the level, you said, how many parts per million, where this is considered below the limit and you wouldn't have to do anything?
Well, the background, which is the standard, is 20. And so we
So we're
have,
at 1900 or
the
2100.
high is around 2100 or thereabouts, and the concentrations range from single digits, there are a few of them out there, is up to the high of 2100. It doesn't seem to be real uniform across the site.
And the question's gonna sound funny, I mean, I know the answer, but what's the purpose of capping the soil? I mean, down to the physical nature of it. Is it to stop people from collecting on their shoes or hands and then traipsing it in, or wind blowing, or what's the?
I would say all of the above.
Okay, so
Keeping
then,
it,
so then the woods and the land and the whole town has dirt. That's the same as what's there. Similar, most likely, because you
It's a-
found
it-
it.
maybe.
You found it over in the playground. You found it out in the woods. You found it over there.
yep, yep.
So what stops that from blowing on the site?
Well, you have
At
to,
some point.
you kind of have to draw the line somewhere.
Exactly.
And so I wouldn't see, and that's why, for example, limiting exposure as part of the construction of the project is the right way to handle this particular situation. Keeping it separated, keeping the separation, because it does represent a risk. It does.
But not a
there-
long-term risk.
It
you
does
said.
represent
I mean,
a long, right, not a short-term
immediate
risk, right,
risk.
not an immediate risk, right. It does represent a long-term risk. So creating that separation eliminates that long-term exposure.
And as long-term, are we talking 20 years? Is that the
Yeah,
benchmark
I believe
that
the
we were using?
modeling is around 20 or 22 years. Yep.
Will the DEP come out and inspect what your plan is implemented? Will
It's a
they?
good question. I don't know if I can say yes or no. We invited them to the public forum and they didn't come. We did talk to them about it. I don't know.
They're not gonna
It's
oversee
not
it, you don't-
They
required.
do generally rely on the LSP.
Yeah,
That's the-
absolutely, absolutely. There's
So you're,
because this site is in the regulatory system currently, there's a licensed site professional involved. All of the sites that are in the regulatory system in Massachusetts require involvement of a licensed site professional. So there's a licensed site professional involved in this project.
right,
And she has kind of been given the authority to implement the regulations. And so there's no requirement for DEP to come and inspect the site. They just follow along as the LSP makes decisions with regards to the regulatory process at the site.
can you find that out if that's gonna be in place or not? You seem to not sure. I mean, is the
I don't-
DEP just gonna look at papers and charts and test results?
They may.
And then not come out?
Yeah, they may not. They may not. Like I said, we asked them to come to the public meeting to talk about the situation, and they chose not to come. We've been keeping them, pretty well abreast of what's happening. As we have some data, we send it over to them. Some of the same plans that you folks have seen, they've seen. So we've kept them in the loop. I hope I'd like to see them come out and walk the site with us and understand
Right.
what's going on.
I would think they
So
would.
we'll continue to work with them on that.
So,
Yep.
so I just wanna go back to this, fill over top, whether it's 18 inches or 3 feet or whatever, which could get very expensive. But you don't have to do it at where the building is, cause that's capped, right?
Right,
You don't have to do it where the roads are or parking lots are, cause that's capped.
that's correct.
You don't have to do it where the playground areas are with the harder surfaces, cause that's capped. So, and you don't have to do it on the fringes, cause that's the woods. And you don't have to do it where you're keeping trees or, like at the wetlands in the center there, or up on the other knoll. You don't have to do it there. So it's really in limited areas where you'd have to actually do this fill, correct?
That's exactly
counting
what
the
we've done,
playground.
Jeff.
Construction site.
Not
You
counting the
have to See
playground.
the colors on here,
Yeah.
that's exactly what we did with this plan and sent it to the contractor.
Okay.
To outline just what you said.
Yeah, we've tried to
And
identify.
some of that
those
is
areas.
already being covered. because of the grade changes.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly, with clean fill.
Right, with clean fill, right,
Some of it though, this is where it gets a little tricky, may have been
reused,
reused
Right.
fill in his figuring at
which you
bid
wouldn't be
time.
able to do at
So
this
that's
point
where we
unless
have
you
to kind of
tested it, right?
separate that out,
Yeah.
right.
Could DEP require, going around other parts of town to do background? Or will they accept historical?
I don't think that they would require that, no. They would act on it if someone sampled, for example. They would act on that, the results of those samples, but they wouldn't necessarily have people sampling elsewhere in town, right?
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, well, one other question. So, we have the area that's within the contract area. You know, it's where we're building our building, and the parking lots and things like that. How is the town handling the areas that are outside of the contract area, meaning the playgrounds, for instance?
In the fields?
Right.
That's actually like another part. This whole thing is being, right, this whole thing is being broken down into segments. We're taking care of what needs to be handled to get the building rolling, the new building. That will be the next part, to figure out, I think right now we need to find out what the capping procedure is gonna be. If it's geological, then the capping is less versus, so we're
If we
waiting
can
to get that
some relief on the
information.
capping, then that
Right.
changes the scope out in the existing ball fields.
Okay.
So that, they are separate, but we're definitely looking at them together at the same time because one helps the other, so to speak. If we can get some relief on the different deposition intervals, then we can apply some of that out, you know, and still make it a safe environment. And that would go a long way to limiting the amount of material that we needed to handle out on the
And when is that
existing ball.
expected to be known?
Like I said, I think, it's a very big priority for us, you know, I'd like to have some answers to that within the next couple of weeks, I would hope. It's pretty paramount to the overall implementation of this whole project.
Does the determining that it's naturally occurring come first,
Before,
before you figure out the amount of capping that's required? If it's naturally occurring, you need
it
less.
definitely gives us some more flexibility, yes. If we can make the determination that it's naturally occurring and we can get the DEP on board with that, then that definitely gives us some more flexibility in terms of how much separation we need to make.
So
Why-
that's a priority too.
Absolutely, yes.
Why would that
Absolutely.
be? If it's there, it's there. What's the difference if it's organic or it's, naturally occurring, or if there was something other reason? It's there. So regardless, why would DEP consider working on it differently?
Well, one is a regulatory process, and one becomes a risk management of sorts. If we can differentiate, the regulations are very clear. If you have a regulatory issue, you have to follow certain procedures. And in fact, in a clean environment, like a ball field, for example, from a building perspective, the requirement is that there's a 3-foot cap and a couple inches of loom on top of that. And the other alternative is pavement or buildings or permanent structures. There's not a lot of flexibility, there's not a lot of room. There's a little bit because the LSP has a little bit of latitude, but it's not nearly as much as you might have in a naturally occurring situation because it's not a regulatory driven process. It's risk, it's what is the group willing to do to, protect the overall construction project, I guess is what it comes down to.
So you're more concerned about the contractors than the
That's
facility
not-
occupied?
That's not,
No?
that's not really what I meant. I mean,
You're trying to follow the regulations.
Right.
And none of us know what really, none of us, lay people, really know what these regulations mean and don't mean, except that we have to follow them. And that's what we have to do. We have to follow the regulations, because they have done more testing than we will ever understand.
Sure, they're
And they're the ones that
prescribed
are requiring it in the
procedures.
first place, so we have to meet what they do. It's just like a code, it's just like, zoning, it's just like any of these things. We have to follow it. And so that's really what you're saying, I think.
George?
Yeah, how would capping affect the stormwater management?
Well, right now, we're not proposing changing the grades at all.
Well,
Um,
the capping just goes right below the soil though, right?
Yeah, but capping, we're still talking about soil that would have the same percolation rates as what was, calculated during the stormwater, drainage design. And right now, the grading
Right
is
now.
proposed to remain the same. So the water's still flowing in the same directions and everything is still the same from that point of view.
But if it's just below, he says just below the surface, so it's gonna hit the surface and go elsewhere, right?
No,
'Cause it
no,
can't-
it's not a cap, you may be thinking of a different kind of cap, like when you cap a landfill, George, that it's a solid impermeable barrier.
Right,
The cap is only
It's soil.
creating
It's
separation.
soil.
It's still basically
allow permeable.
gravel, with a certain sieve analysis, that meets the same
Okay.
drainage characteristics.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could just interject I'm sorry, Rob, you were gonna ask? a
After
question?
you, sir.
I was just gonna interject kind of the struggle we're going through, obviously using Russ's expertise and working with Kyle and his engineers. What we're trying to do is obviously work with everybody to bring in some logic as to how to, A, protect the workers while we're there, because they're gonna be exposed a lot more, because once the site is turned over, there'll be zero exposure to the public. So it really is involved, how do we protect the workers? In dealing with Russ and his advice and getting some more information, when you talk about the building slab and the pavement areas, those areas, once the slabs are down, we're all set, we're kept. Well, we better look at it, what do we do in the meantime, while we're waiting for the slab? We're gonna obviously have a plateaued area. So we've been able to identify, or Russ has been able to identify for us, that if we take that rough grade, and if there's a foot of gravel under the slab, if we supply 6 inches of clean material, we now have a clean site for the workers to work on. If we over excavate the foundations, and we over excavate them by 6 inches and put in structural fill material at the bottom, we now have created clean material, so we don't need 40-hour employees for the farm contractor, who we would probably have a problem in getting. So we're trying to take all of the expertise and come up with a plan. One of the issues we have here is, we have a balanced site. A balanced site means we have as much fill as we do surplus. That presents a little bit of a problem, because if it's an exact balanced site, and we have to remove 2 or 3 feet in certain areas to provide the necessary cap, that means we now have developed a surplus, which becomes a problem because it's contaminated surplus. What do we do with it? You have to haul it off site. As you said, it's a pretty significant expense. So the question is, can we do something with grades? Is there a way that, in looking at the balance of the existing fields, can we use some of that material there and then cap that with a couple of feet, which might be a lot less expensive than hauling it off? So what we're trying to do is work with the contractor, who has supplied quantities right now. His quantities are considerably different than our quantities. So we're meeting tomorrow to go through the quantities he has, with the quantities we developed with our estimators and with Kyle's estimators. We're trying to create logic in the materials. What do we do and how do we handle material? We think we have a pretty good plan on how to isolate the balance of the trades to prepare a clean site so that there isn't any disruption or any hazard to the workers. But there's still gonna be some interaction, there's no question about it. So the question is, you try and bring everything together, and if I'm misspeaking any place, Russ, please jump in. But we're trying to create something that is reasonable, logical. It's still gonna have a significant expense, because we're now changing the contractor's game plan. He was gonna move, 35,000 yards from X into Y. We're not doing that anymore. No matter what we do, we're gonna have a managed plan that's gonna say what's gonna go where. And the question of, can you adjust any of these grades and not get involved in any Concom or drainage issues? We're gonna have to talk about that. Maybe we can do some. But that's the whole idea, is to obviously put together a plan that keeps everybody healthy at the most economical cost. And that's the major effort that we're involved with right now, and that's working with all parties to pull something together to make sure that we have a safe operation during construction, and when we get done with the site, your site is gonna be the cleanest site in Georgetown, because it's all gonna be absolutely capped with the appropriate materials, or pavement or concrete.
Ellie, I'm not sure where this question goes, but where does the process of our second opinion?
That's coming up next.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
we're
look
gonna
at
get
this,
to that
I was
next.
gonna get into that, yeah.
So-
Russ.
Actually,
So-
can I just ask a question about what you just said? So I know we're still waiting to hear whether it's organic or the arsenic got here some other way. So all the plans that you're working on now, what assumption are you going on? And,
Worst case scenario.
okay,
It's
so,
yeah.
so you're going on that it was not
Within 3
organic?
feet,
Okay,
exactly.
so then, at what point, so we're going down this path now.
Right.
That we're trying to make plans so we can move forward based on the worst case scenario. If it is not the worst case scenario, then what happens?
What we're trying to do is, working with the contractor, we're trying to come up with 2 options.
Right.
If it's the worst case scenario, it's X, and if we can reduce the 3 to 1 or 1.5, it's gonna be Y. So we're hoping to come up with numbers both ways. Clearly, there's a substantial advantage if we're able to determine, or if Russ is able to determine it's naturally
Right.
occurring. We have a much more simplified arrangement. Don't ask me technically why that happens, my question would be the same as Tilly's. But the
Right,
fact of the
exactly.
matter is, it's different from a regulatory standpoint.
Right, exactly, I
So-
get that, okay.
So, one last piece, at least for me. When you're figuring out the cut and fill, for either of those 2 scenarios, chances are, because of cut and fill calculations, if they were equal, you would have to put soil someplace. So then it's a matter of finding a place, either on the site or off the site, to put that. And I don't know who makes the decision, but either the school or this committee would have to determine whether, for instance, the lower field, well, not the lower field, but the softball field, which is below the flat field, is significantly lower than the other field. And that is one place, possibly, if it meets with the school's intentions,
Yeah.
that you could use that as a fill, and then you would be capping the whole thing later on anyways. So that's a
You
possibility.
don't have your glasses on, Jeff.
I can see far, I just can't see 2 feet in front of me.
Little stockpile area.
Yeah,
right
okay.
there. So we're thinking the same way.
Yeah.
We haven't made any decisions, but we just want to, as Pat said,
So I think that's a great idea.
work with the contractor and keep all options open, so we're thinking about that.
Okay.
That's
And
my
also,
idea.
you have, you probably figured this one out also, because everything I say you've done, so I should just shut my mouth. But when the school comes out, the old school comes out, then you have fill there that,
Yes,
and for
there's
that
a
field that you
hole there
probably
that needs
figured
filled
all
too.
that out
Yeah.
too, so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, we may have figured it out, we have to make sure the contractors figured out too, and accounted
Right,
for it, and
right.
so we're,
Okay.
you know, we, as Pat says, try to minimize the cost here, and, not calculate things that, aren't gonna have to go off-site when they really stay on-site.
How
Phil-
much do you need to stockpile? Do you know how many yards?
Well, actually, right now, we're working with the contractor on that, because his quantities are much different than our quantities. He's got a lot more quantity than we have. We think the quantities are off for whatever reason. But that's the purpose of our meeting with him, to go over it and compare notes and find out what's the real quantities, and then we'll go from there. But we have, we have a lot of the, what I would call, I guess you'd call it loam, but the top foot of material, that, we don't need very much loam on that site. And that material's all in the same boat. So that material there is something that's organic. It's unfortunately contains certain amounts of arsenic, and that's gonna be accumulated, and that's one type of material we have to get rid of. And then we have another group of material that becomes subsoil that would have been part of the balance, but we don't have a balance anymore because we have to get rid of that to provide room for the cap. So we'll have 2 groups of materials that we'll be looking to get rid of, stockpile, or a combination of both. And we can certainly let you know, what the situation is and how it all shakes out. But that'll be important, because as we determine what those quantities are, we can look at the areas available on the site to see exactly what would that mean if we use that in that particular area and, cover that over, if in fact we're naturally generating arsenic, maybe just a 1-foot cap does it. And you can cover everything out there, because the amount of money you're gonna save will certainly overwhelm putting in an irrigation system, et cetera, so.
And selfishly, I said one more, sorry, I meant 2. Selfishly, is turf a cap? A turf field a cap?
That keeps going around.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you have a question?
We'll have to do an analysis, cost
Turf
analysis
is
on
it
that one.
artificial turf or
Yeah.
natural turf?
Artificial turf.
Yeah, I guess the other question I have is, as in the worst case scenario that you guys are kind of drafting as an option, is there any risk of us approaching the maximum budget and the contingency allowance on this project that was originally budgeted for? So I think it was $4 million or so that was, the bids came under the actual amount that we had initially proposed, and then there's probably, I think, a $400,000.
We should get a better idea this week as we start to go through all of those things, because tomorrow we're gonna be meeting and comparing notes on the quantities and then applying them. So what we're trying to do is sometime in the course of the week, kinda get a handle on it. One of the things we were trying to do is present it on Monday in a format that would say, here we are, you can have something to vote on, and we would obviously be within those numbers. But again, being a fractionalized week and seeing numbers coming in as late as they are, that's probably a lofty goal, that's probably unattainable, given the time that we have to look at it. But I would say we're getting very close to that period of time where we're gonna be able to put a number on it and have the contractor look at all the items that are necessary.
And that number wouldn't actually be 4 million, because the split is basically 50-50.
Yeah.
So this is site work, and I believe it's not, because we're over the 8%, it's not
I
even
think you can
covered.
assume it's 100% George.
So it's 100% George, so it's really a 2 million that we're going against, because we wouldn't get that other 2 anyways.
That's right. And then, so the reason I bring that question up is for the committee just to consider is, you know, we have if we approach that limit, it jeopardizes the financing of the project. Maybe not today, but when the building costs are going in one direction, right? And if we don't have that wiggle room, we just have to be prepared that this cost may exceed what the bonding allowance was and altogether. So it sounds like it's at risk.
We'll see, but, I
We'll know a
mean,
lot
Yeah,
more, like I
right,
said, within the next week or so, we'll have a lot more information.
I don't think I get
Yeah.
upset about it yet, because we haven't done you guys haven't done the analysis, but, you know, I mean, 2 million
There's
goes a
been
long
nothing to
way.
calculate at this point, you know,
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
We'll
we-
find
yeah,
out. It's a
and-
great question, though.
Can you be
It's
a
great
little bit
question.
more, can you be a little bit more specific about when you think you will have that answer?
Well, it depends on, like I said, we're gonna meet with the contractor tomorrow,
Yeah.
we're gonna share a lot of information, they're gonna ask a lot of questions. DRA and Russ may have a lot more work to do on it. I would hope that, you know, sometime early next week,
Early next week?
we'd be able to get some information, so that toward the end of the week, we'd be able to put it together and, you know, battle out whatever we need to battle out, and quantities and so forth, and come up with a game plan. I would love to think that by that time, you know, Russ would be able to have some information on the naturally occurring, because that'll be you know, that's a substantial
Right,
item,
that's-
you know, so, again, we're just gonna keep, this has been an exhausting effort for everybody, and we've been lying awake nights trying to put it together and come up with the most economical solution. And again, not being experts in the field of contamination, we've had to work close with the experts on what they're gonna allow, what's capable, what's possible, and so forth, and then take that and put it into practical construction terms as it relates to how do we get it done in the field.
So we're talking 2 weeks?
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Where is the MSBA in this so far?
Oh, when I go through the chronology, I prepared a report for them, sent it in the day before we had the board meeting. Sent it in to them, they called back and said, after the board meeting, we'd like to sit down and just go through it with you. We did, as a matter of fact, Carol was there. We sat down and went through it all, Carl was there. Explained where we were, told them what we were doing. They thanked us for the information and told us to keep them in the loop.
That's it?
That's it.
Have you, you still have not gotten the revised 3011 with them, correct, based on the,
Well, there isn't a 3011 we can give them. There's no 3011 because you need costs to input into the 3011.
so
All we
yours-
have is Chuck prepared a schedule of values and sent that into MSBA, because again, I think at the last meeting, I indicated that what we were hoping was gonna happen, that whatever the costs are, we would like that to be part of the 3011 base
Correct.
contract number.
Right.
There was some speculation that they weren't crazy about that. They've now agreed that that's the way it should be done. That's terrific, because what does that do? If we did that as a change order, if they said, no, we're not gonna do it, you're gonna have to do it as a change order. When we do it as a change order, right off the bat, we'd have to move money from contingency
Right.
into the project,
Yep.
and it would really deplete the contingency going forward.
right,
So they've said, no, that's the way to do it. So they're gonna let us take whatever the dollars are, they're not gonna reimburse them, but they're gonna let us make that part of the 3011 base contract.
Is there
That now
any-
leaves the regular contingency available to be used during the course of construction.
right. Is there any part of this that could fall under anything that would be reimbursed?
I
like getting
can't
the
think of
LSP
any,
and
but
stuff, I
I know
mean,
Chuck
anything
is
like
very
that?
creative, he might be able to think of something,
Chuck?
but right now, we're kind of numbed
there-
by just looking for an economic procedure to get this
Are you
thing
working
done,
on that?
You know,
Are you working on that?
Yeah.
to see if there's
Count the road as
anything.
a floor slab?
Yeah. We're looking at it, again, using the worst case scenario, we're saying none of it's gonna be reimbursed. If we can pull something off to get it reimbursed, or we can get them under the unusual circumstances that we have
Yep.
to consider some of it, my
We
suggestion
are,
is.
Georgetown
let's
is
not
the
pay.
case for unusual circumstances,
And-
remember that,
That's
so,
right,
Chuck?
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Exactly,
Just to be
exactly.
upfront, it's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, my initial conversations with them, it's highly unlikely.
Are there other sources of funding for things like this?
That's outside of us.
I'm not aware of any.
I think that's something the town would have to
yeah.
pursue
Insurance?
on the outside.
I don't know about
Insurance.
that.
I'm not aware of
Especially if
any
it's naturally occurring, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
certainly
It's
not.
not a brownfield, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not high enough, thank God.
Can you go for state aid?
It's a niche over a nuisance is what it boils down to, you know?
Senator Tarr is aware of the situation. He was at the meeting
Right.
last week, and we asked him that question, so he's looking into it.
So, okay.
All right, so is this something you wanna go through, or is it for
Well,
us
only
to
that
read
it answers
through?
some of the questions that just came up, just to run through it real quick, I think we covered the bulk of it. On the 18th, we had a meeting at Kyle's office, we met with Kyle and Civil and Landscaping and Russ, and we went through, and the purpose of that meeting was to help the contractor understand what could be used and where. There was a colored plan that was sent to Brate, showing that in this particular area you needed 3 feet, in this particular area you needed 2, whatever it was. So that was the whole purpose of that, he was provided that, to obviously start his, analysis.
That's that, I don't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but that's the plan right there.
Yeah.
And we just, even in the worst case scenario, we did take some liberties with regards to the backfill materials and the thicknesses. The blue is where we held the line with regards to the 3 feet of separation. And then there's another series of color coding where we tried to use less than 3 feet in areas that were largely inaccessible. So, just to give an explanation on some of that, so we didn't follow the hard line.
Like these fringe areas that are just landscaping of the cleared edge.
Right,
Um,
right, and we talked to the landscaping
That's
contractor,
less.
or
And
the
then-
landscape engineer, and he talked to us about some of the flora and fauna that was gonna be out there. So we were comfortable reducing the thickness of backfill in those areas.
We also
So-
identified, there are certain areas of drainage where, the spec already required them to bring in, off-site material to do these rain garden kind of areas. So we would already have, I think in the spec, we had like 30 inches already of off-site material. So the only difference there in a sense would be 6 inches of additional material to get the 3 feet of separation there.
In the worst case.
In the worst case, so we were trying to be, specific, as Jeff was doing in his own mind, to identify, we really don't have that much, when you look at it, near the building, there are very little blue areas where we require 3 feet of separation. Now, we know the construction realities are a little different, you can't exactly, excavate the site like this, up and down, so that's what we'll talk about with the contractor tomorrow.
What was the
reality.
different colors of the flags I saw out on the site the other day? That you got green, and then you got orange, and then it looked like pink. What are all
I
those?
haven't seen those yet, Tilly, as to.
What do they
Yeah,
mean?
I don't think we haven't done any flagging out there on the site as it
I mean,
relates
what
to
the
this.
contractor has done is
Oh,
flag
no?
the limits
No,
of clearing.
no.
I think that's contractor flagging for layout purposes.
But I don't know.
Yeah,
about
but I'm used to the
different
pink
colors.
with the conservation board, but I didn't know what the other colors were.
Yeah, I don't know either. They've clearly flagged the limit of clearing, because they've already started clearing up to about this point here on the site.
This was just close to the back of the parking lot as it is today,
Yeah?
where that's when I was up. I wasn't up there today, but last week I was there, and they had all these different flags. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, we haven't done any, we haven't put any blue flags out or anything like that.
Well,
We
I'd like
try
you to tell us,
identify-
tell
Yeah.
us what they are, because
Yeah.
I'd like to go on the site and keep an eye on you.
Okay.
Have you done the calculations of the 3 foot, 6 inches? And
No, that's
They
what we're gonna
haven't
talk
done
about
those yet?
tomorrow. Yeah.
The, on the site, where was I going here with this?
It's okay, we're all in that
Stockpile
boat.
area?
Well, you know what, I'll give you a minute, And sort of address something Tilly said, I had a conversation with Courtney about this, how going forward, you know, as a committee, every once in a while, we might decide that we wanna hold a meeting, maybe in the trailer or something, so that we can get a tour of what's going on throughout the construction, you know, just get some visual updates ourselves that way.
We may
But I
have to
know
go
that
to a
we're not
class.
free to just go out there and walk around, because that is no longer our site. So you can't just go out there and take a little walk. So did that help you?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Before all this happened, was there a plan or money available to do soil test on the soil that was coming into the site?
Well, typically they have to submit samples of any off-site material. I don't know if that testing or that requirement will change. We'll still get, you know, what do you call it, documentation that, you know, what they're bringing off-site is
That the
clean.
material's clean.
Okay.
Besides meeting the sieve analysis, it's gotta be clean.
I don't know whether the IRA plan requires that
No,
off-site
in
material be
fact,
tested.
we spoke, and the original spec calls for a certification of the
Right.
material coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
I already
So
called for that anyway.
It came up, and we talked about it, and we confirmed that it was already spec'd that way.
Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't require any additional testing on imported material.
Now, if you have to truck material out, could it be used for a landfill?
Like daily cover at a
Yes.
landfill, for example, there are a number of options for disposal. A little bit of it depends on what the levels are. We'd have to test the soil in a composite manner, and so if we knew that there was going to be, you know, 500 or 5,000 or whatever the magic number was, you have to collect a certain number of samples, and then whatever's in those samples kind of dictates a little bit on where you can take it. So taking it to a landfill would certainly be one of the options that we would consider, but if the levels are too high, you might have to take it to a lined landfill, for example, or some type of a different facility. There's a number of tests that'll be performed on the material that may go off-site, which will give you some options in terms of disposal.
But you are testing soil that's coming in already, right?
That's what
That's what they just said,
We already
right.
own that and.
We own that already, yeah.
We didn't see any of that data at all, like, this
Has
is,
it come
Well,
in yet?
nothing's.
Oh, no,
The
nothing's
contractor's
come
gotta
into the site
propose
yet.
it.
oh, you haven't brought in any
Oh, no,
yet?
no, no.
No, that's something the
No.
contractor would propose to, if he's, you know, when he brings his bank run gravel in, he'd have
Yeah.
to say, I'm bringing this in, here's
Yeah.
a sieve analysis,
That's
here's a
what they said, they
certification.
checked the spec.
Right.
You did
I
that,
was
yeah.
surprised how
It's not
much
testing on site,
lower
it's documentation.
the area was that I did see. You know, I stood in behind the parking lot and up on the hill there to the left, and it looks like that elevation is extremely low. I mean, it looks like you did more than cut trees.
All they do is cut trees.
No, they
That's
just
all they
cut
did.
trees till
Yeah.
they-
There's no
It's
drip
really
in it.
leveled. It's
That's the way
really
it
a
goes.
lot level.
Yeah, no, it's all
I
they did.
understand it moves like that,
Yeah,
but it's extremely low. It's like,
nothing's been cut, just trees pulled.
Yeah, just trees, that's all.
Okay, do you wanna continue on?
Yeah, just continuing on, and then again, based on the plan that was done and shipped to them, that was developed on the 18th, Brake took that, and they're working on that based on the soil utilization plan with continuing dialogue tomorrow. I know Kyle has talked to Russ about their construction monitoring costs and so forth. No matter who does that monitoring, a lot's gonna be determined by how many days, and that's something we gotta work with Braid on, because the plan that we're looking at hopefully is gonna reduce the number of days, no matter who does it, by creating these areas that are covered with at least construction separation at 6 inches, so that we're not in that situation, the rest of it's stabilized, so that we can
Okay.
reduce some of those days. So again, working with Braid, and obviously Kyle is talking to Russ. Getting into the question you raised, Rob, about your peer review. The town has engaged a peer review firm, Jim Luca, who's Green Seal Environmental. I think, Phil, you're the one that mentioned that he's
Yeah.
done some work in town. Conservation Commission knows him and so forth. He's prepared a preliminary report. I don't know whether you were gonna pass that out, Courtney, or not, but
it was
there's a,
sent.
We sent it around,
you
right?
sent it around?
We sent it,
Yeah.
yeah.
We sent it around.
you have a copy? I'll
general-
take a
In
print out.
general, he didn't take, I'm just very generalizing, but he didn't have, he was pretty much confirming that what we have out there, obviously, we have a dust situation to take care of, we have separation to take
Thanks.
care of, and obviously for the monitor, and he had a few different wrinkles on how to do it, and a few different cost categories that he would be talking about. We've encouraged them to have some dialogue back and forth, so that all of those good ideas can be consolidated, and we can come up with a conclusion. And again, like I said, he's supposed to be supplying some information on costs in the next day or so. And one of the questions came up about our interaction with MSBA. As I mentioned, we had a written memo that we sent to MSBA on the 19th, and we met with them on the 20th. I won't double back over that. We already talked about that. Brate advised on 11/20. We had anticipated on 11/20 that Brate was gonna have his information to us. There were some other things that came up between him and his site contractor. He advised us in the afternoon, after Michelle had sent out the memo, on what we were gonna be looking to vote on, that his numbers wouldn't be ready until today. We're actually gonna be looking at them hard tomorrow morning, but basically quantifying materials. And at that point, he also advised in the same memo that his clearing contractor had advised him that if we didn't get started today, we were gonna lose a month. And at that point, there was some dialogue with Ellie, Michelle, and Mike and so forth as to how we could get the $10,000 that we would need for monitoring the rest of the clearing. That was only gonna take 5 days, but if we lost the time, we would lose the clearing, which meant that was the next step in doing the cutting and filling. And so there was a dialogue and so forth, and we basically authorized it to get going. And tonight, I guess, you would have on the table the formalization of that $10,000 expenditure. So there was somebody out monitoring. They'll be out there monitoring for the next 5 days while we go through the rest of it. And hopefully at some time frame, we'll get both of these long-term monitoring prices approved by whomever and get Brate's numbers approved so we can get moving on the whole shoot match and not have to do it in dribs and drabs. And then anticipating Brate's cost information today, which again partially happened, more quantifications, a meeting with Brate and so forth is scheduled for tomorrow morning, which we're gonna hold. And then the natural occurring determination, Brate is currently pricing up the worst-case scenario. Hopefully we'll have an alternate for a more relaxed approach as we go through this arrangement. And the goal is to complete Brate cost review and compare the cost-based monitoring cost, all in an attempt to provide information in advance of a proposed building committee meeting on 12/2 to approve both construction and environmental. Again, we'll keep you poised on that, but quite frankly, that's probably not something that's gonna be accomplishable in the 3 days, active 3 days that we have this week. But we'll have a little better idea as to when we would propose a meeting, whether it's gonna be the 10th, or whether we should do something next week sometime. We'll give you a better handle on that in the next couple of days, if that's acceptable. And then areas outside the Brate scope is a reminder, and that came up just a short while ago. Right now, Brate is pricing up within the construction scope. That's what he's looking at right now. But we do have our eye, we're looking out of the corner of our eye, because as we develop this surplus material, and as we understand that there may be a desire to elevate some of those fields, we may be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Be able to utilize some of that material and eliminate a huge cost to remove material off the site, or at least the majority of the material off site. So again, we're trying to keep that in mind as well. So that's kind of where we are, in a kind of a simplistic overview, with each one of these having a few hundred subdivisions within the confines of each bullet.
So if we're still looking at the existing fields, how will that impact us financially? Because if we end up doing some work over there, I understand that if we can move some of our soil over there and then cap it, it's gonna save a lot of money to the cost of the project. But if we end up kind of mixing the 2 projects, how do we have a delineation between the cost of the new school project and the field?
This kind of came up when we were doing the testing on the field and talking to Mike, who I believe double-checked with the council regarding the fact that it's an associated, aligned project, or whatever terminology was used.
The way the warrant article was written, we're allowed to spend the money raised from the bond on direct costs to the construction and other costs incidental or related to. And that just gives you a hole wide enough to drive a Mack truck through. So anything.
Okay. But just.
Anything.
It allows us
Right,
to
I-
test.
right, and
So in other words,
that-
the building committee will pay for it.
No, but I get that. I get that
Yeah, that's
point.
not the question.
I get that point, because I know we did check that. But my point is, if we have to incur more cost for the fields, and we know we're gonna be running possibly a little bit tight on money, okay? we were doing great before, but now we know we're gonna be running tight. What do we do about that, and how can we separate the fields? Because if the fields end up costing more money, that tips us over the amount that we had appropriated for this cost of this project, how do we keep that separate,
Well,
if we need to?
Well, I mean, we can keep it separate. I'm not sure what the effect will be, because there's actually an advantage. There may be
I
an
know
advantage.
there is, I
So
know.
But a
again,
mental
we'd have to do the best we
separation.
can about separating how that would work out.
Right, but then, there will be more work to cap it and to, you know what I mean, to bring more fill in, or,
That's right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I guess my question is, how do we maximize and take advantage of using what we have, but then not paying extra
I mean,
in
in other
the
words-
cost of this
Yeah,
project, if we don't have the money?
Yeah, I mean, in other words, what's happening is that the grounds over there are at a certain level,
Yeah.
and the
Right.
soil that we're taking and we have to dump is at the same level, basically. It's 19, 20, in fact, it's less, it's 19 from 50 to 19 rather than 21. But anyways, so then what we can do as this project is just prepare the whole site over there as a dumping ground and flatten it out and whatever. And then the next step is to have a project that's gonna cover it. That's basically what you're
Yeah.
saying.
That's what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and you might, again, you might wanna employ what we just talked about, what we're gonna be using there. You might
And-
wanna put that 6
well-
inches of clean material over, just from a work
Well,
standpoint, just to keep it down.
Yeah, but it may be a moot thing anyways, in that, that if the costs all come in under, and we're still within our range, then we may have enough money
To
to
do that.
actually cap it ourselves.
I know,
So,
which
so
would be
those
great.
are all the scenarios.
Right, that would be
they
great
gotta
if we
figure
did,
out.
but just, kind of Phil's point, and we know that we have appropriated a certain amount of money, that
Yep.
just to keep track of
Yep.
the new school project versus,
Yeah.
the current Pembroke
Right.
issues. Phil?
Just a
I'm
question
really
on-
surprised
I mean,
that you're,
Phil,
oh, go ahead, Phil.
Tilly, just a question, I get this from a lot of parents. There's two things. One, from an environmental standpoint, can you direct us to some sort of a guide on exposure to arsenic? If you can talk to Carol Bond, maybe she knows the resource for a layperson to be able to understand it. Not too scientific, maybe not from her.
Wikipedia.
But that would be helpful. And the second question I have is just from a construction standpoint. So, the fields at Pembroke, is the capping going to be done at the end of the project or the beginning of next spring? I'm just trying to get a sense
You
of
mean
when
the
those
exi-
fields
the
would be
exi-
available
The
again?
existing
The
fields?
existing fields?
Yeah.
Well, right now, those existing fields are not part
There's
of the
no-
project.
Right.
They're outside the scope of the project.
Right.
And I think right now, Phil, we don't have a plan for that, because
Yeah.
we don't know what needs to be done.
So there's been no
So
plan yet
there is no
developed
plan.
for those fields, other than they're outside the scope of this project. But what we're saying is, we're trying to look at how can we, address the problem in the fields, and yet maybe solve some of the problems here to the economic advantage of
I
Judson.
get that. It's purely just a expectation
Yeah.
Yep.
setting, It
Yeah.
sounds like, from what I'm hearing, if that's the solution, then it's going to be at the end of the project, or toward the end of the project, when all that fill needs to be,
Maybe
Not
not. If we have
necessarily.
enough
No, 'cause
money,
they've
if we have
been-
enough money to cap it, then we'll cap it.
Right.
Because then you don't have to manage the dust
Right.
off. You don't have to manage the dust off of the existing fields. Just have to
Or the
manage the
town
dust,
cap it.
at least this project, off of the dumped
Or the GL.
areas. But if you can cap it all, why not do it now? Because then everybody's happy.
Pat,
And I
I
think Jeff
kind
said he's
of
working
don't
on a turf
understand
field,
what you've
so-
just
Yeah.
answered there. Number one, the bottom line of the bond, right? We included, the whole scope was the fields and the school, correct?
Not the existing,
No.
Not the existing fields.
The new field, when the
new
Pembroke
fields.
The
comes
new
down.
field.
Right, right.
Yeah, those are,
Right.
that's included. The
That's
fields where
tipping-
the school is being torn down, that's all part of the project.
So there
And
has
the septic
absolutely no
system.
cost with those existing fields today, in that bond.
Which
No,
field? The
no,
existing
no.
fields?
Right.
Yeah.
No,
What I
no.
think you just might say is that right now, we have been no cost assigned there, but under the terminology of the bond, we're hearing that if it's attendant, what was the language you used?
Related
Mike?
there, too.
If it's related,
Incidental or
you
related.
could actually assign those
See,
costs to that.
all along, I thought it was. I mean, from day one, I thought that was the whole gist of it, and particularly from a lot of these people, board members,
No,
is
we
that
would
they
never
wanted to
touch- no, we would
preserve
never-
that
You would never-
field.
you would
Yeah,
never-
do would
exactly.
preserve,
We-
that's
we-
right.
We wanted to
You could
preserve the
certainly
fields.
incorporate the use of the fields as part of the project when everything's said and done, but
Right.
there was no work planned
No
on the
work.
field.
No, we weren't
No,
gonna-
absolutely work plan on that, those
Right.
fields. Even
No.
though the contractors were gonna work on it, they were gonna
No,
park
no,
on
no,
it.
No one was working
That
on the
was way
fields.
back.
They were
at
gonna
the
park
beginning.
on it, weren't they?
No,
Never.
no,
That was
definitely
only
not.
way back,
Okay.
way back. That was one option at
Yeah.
one point,
That was
but.
7 years ago, Tilly.
Right, right, I guess so. It's been a long time.
But,
Yeah.
you know, you can fill that back area, and you could, in fact, if we're gonna cap it immediately, you could actually fill across the whole thing too, you know,
Yeah, we have to be
if you needed
careful
to.
of the leaching field location.
Yeah, that's the highest it can get,
Um,
or not, because,
We'd have to engineer it to bring it up, bring that area up, and that would have to be brought up not with on-site material, but with off-site material, so I think.
no, I'm
it's,
talking about, yeah, well, that's
No, I'm
tricky.
talking about the proposed leaching area.
Yeah, no, when I was talking
Right here.
about, yeah, no, I was gonna ask that question too, but you just answered it, but,
Right.
but once you fill that, you could
Yeah.
also fill that.
You could get this,
Yeah.
All level, right?
you gotta get that
Tie
level,
it all in?
Yeah.
take
Yeah,
out.
I mean,
some
that,
trees
the
here.
area that's already higher, that's the 2 baseball fields,
Yeah,
so the kids,
yeah, yeah.
right in there.
Yep.
That could get like maybe 6 inches over the whole thing, or whatever, and
You
then,
have to keep in mind,
and then the rest
we
in the
do
back.
have a buffer here to a wetland.
yeah.
and
You lose a little bit of
you
field
can't
when you do
encroach,
it.
Right, so you
Yeah.
lose
Yeah.
a little horizontal.
Angle reposal.
But you do gain back the slope that you're, you know, on the other side.
Exactly,
So-
yeah.
So it'll
And
be a
obviously,
wash.
if you can make it
Might be a
level, you have a lot more
Right.
flexibility.
A lot
in
more
laying out
flexibility.
fields. Yeah.
So within 2 weeks, we'll know what to do, what we can do on the whole site. How bad the arsenic is, and if we have to use those fields to put fill, and if we have enough money to,
You're not gonna let Pat have Thanksgiving turkey. That's a lot to do in 2 weeks, but
well,
That-
so what is the
we are
timeframe
trying to
we're
do
gonna
We
it
just
all
said,
at
our goal
once.
is to, in a couple, we're talking within
So,
a couple of weeks to be
couple
able to
weeks.
go, yeah.
We
So-
And
wouldn't
it's,
have it
again,
after, so we'll lose our appetite.
it won't happen because we aren't doing it. We need to obviously have the contractor pull this stuff together. We need to make sure we're all on the same page. We need engineering input as to what we can and can't do. We're certainly gonna need Russ's input to make sure we're staying on target with DEP. So there's a lot of pieces that have to come together, you know, to have
so
it.
we probably shouldn't have a meeting for a couple of weeks then.
Well, you have a meeting scheduled for December 10th, you know, so whether we need one, I'd like to think we need one because we're gonna have all this information wrapped up in a week and we'd like to meet in another week, you know, to get it approved. But chances are, you know, it may not happen till the 10th. But again, if something happens before that, we'll certainly give you notice and let you know that it's coming or come together.
But as we said, there are
That is 2
two
weeks.
parts to the cost that we're talking about. You know, the construction impacts and then there's the monitoring impacts
Right.
too. And
Yeah.
and we need to have monitoring right now, and that's what was
What the
sort
tenant-
of
That's what you
authorized
authorized
done
right now.
for an emergency basis. So
Right.
as long as that's still good, then
I'm gonna have a, take a motion for that
Okay.
in a few minutes,
Yeah.
as soon as we get through this.
All right, can I just ask one question? So, all right, so yeah, so we authorize that, you know, we'll vote on it. But, so, once the clearing is done, which we've authorized the money for the environmental consultants to be there. So that'll be done, the clearing should be done by next
Next
week at the
week.
latest, okay. Are they just going to not do anything else then?
Well, they're
Until we
gonna
get
need-
all this?
They're gonna need some more authorization, and we're gonna need some
Well,
more, we're gonna have
okay,
to make a
but-
decision on who's gonna monitor this whole thing on the rest of the project. So
Okay.
this, again, we're back to, we need those two things. Brate needs, because what's gonna
So
happen is.
we're not gonna have that. We're not
We're-
gonna have our numbers before we
first-
need to authorize again.
Because what's gonna happen is, we're gonna need to know, what are we gonna do with the loam? The first thing that's gonna happen is, we're gonna strip the loam off that site. We know we have a huge surplus. Do we haul it off, or is there gonna be some place to store it, or use it on site? So these are things that we're gonna be getting numbers on as fast as we
So
can.
is Brate ready to roll into this right as soon as the clearing is done?
oh yeah.
From a
From a
construction
yes.
standpoint, the answer is yes.
So we might need
Okay.
to meet next week just to approve certain parts of this then.
Well, it's gonna be hard to approve certain
Without-
parts. We don't have right now, he has not requested any remobilization for clearing. He figures that we'll pick this all up now when we do the whole lump sum change order
Right.
to cover everything. Because what we're trying to do is bring you a total impact to the project, so we can look
Right.
at and answer, how does this affect the whole job? How does it affect, we don't wanna keep bringing it in bits and pieces and so forth, because you won't have a whole look at the whole thing.
So the clearing was critical path. Do we know of
Clearing-
any other critical path? Has a contractor raised a flag and said a
No.
delay is coming up if we?
That's the last one we're aware of, because that one just so happened
Right, yeah.
that we were gonna lose this guy for a month. That would have been a real problem for for 5 days worth of work to say we can't finish because he can't come back for a month, so
So he's
we-
gonna be finished
we'll get
next
rid of
week, right?
Gonna be finished
So
next
then the
week.
following on the 10th, that's our next meeting, and that'll be,
Yeah.
But the question is,
Well,
will
but
he might
he
need to
be
be ready
ready
to
to
move
start
on to-
work on the 9th? And are we gonna be delaying things if we wait till the 9th
Well,
or
we're
the
gonna,
10th?
again, we're gonna be talking to him tomorrow, so again, like
Okay.
I said, this is gonna be a
So we
very
may- in other
intimate
words,
communication situation.
We may have a
that's-
meeting next
that we're
week and
gonna
we
have.
may not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is he gonna have a breakdown of the construction impacts of him not working?
yeah.
yeah.
He's gonna have, we're asking him from here till the day he turns over the keys. Both from a cost standpoint, from a schedule standpoint.
Will it
as
be
to what-
separate costs from him not working and the arsenic?
I think he will have some of those things broken down,
breakdowns.
yes.
Yeah, have breakdowns,
Yeah.
all that.
All right. All right, so we already know that we're waiting for more information from the peer reviewer.
Which we should
And,
have, again, we should have some more information, but, to add on to what you just have from a preliminary, you should have now some cost information.
all right, so at this point then, I'd like to entertain a motion to pay Wilcox and Barton a sum not to exceed $10,000 for the services needed to complete this
The clearing.
phase of the clearing, this
And they're
week's.
doing it, what, on a T&M basis? Time and materials basis? Is that-
Yeah, we have, Russ gave us daily
what it
rates.
is?
And that's what we
Daily rate.
used to come
Oh,
up with
daily
that
rates.
10,000, the daily rate, plus, some equipment and so forth, and we ballparked it at 10,000 for that 5 days. Yeah.
So,
So
would
moved.
anyone, so moved?
Second.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this now? No? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. And then the last thing that we had on the agenda, but we just finished discussing, and we just don't have any other fees to vote on, rate builders. So we do have to, get back to that. And just to quote Pat, this is a very complex situation, and we just have to work our way through it. All right, anything else? Then I make a motion to adjourn. Would anyone care to make a motion to
So
adjourn?
moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I second it.
Thank you. Michelle seconded it. Motion carries.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you, you
guys.
too.
Forward this to-
We'll be in touch.